Hello and welcome back to OT, the podcast. We're here to talk about watches, time, and something a little bit different today. My name's Felix Schultz.
And I'm Andy Green.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm all right. Who's our guest this week?
A couple of local legends based in Melbourne, Australia.
Nice.
I imagine all of the listeners have heard them once or twice if they've listened to the show. That's Felix Schultz and Andy Green.
Oh,
We're doing a bit of a different episode today. We realised that we went quite hard last year, and we assumed that a lot of people that found the show or listened to us kind of knew who we were and knew our backstory and knew how we met, when the emails and Instagram comments and DMs kind of indicate otherwise. And so we thought, why don't we do something different and interview each other a little bit and talk about, I guess our origin story. So that's probably going to be the show title, the Felix and Andy origin story.
I've always wanted to be a superhero, so that suits me just fine.
Perfect. So it might be a bit longer, might be a bit shorter. Who knows? But before we get into it, let's use the power of post-production to insert an ad read from today's wonderful sponsor. This episode of OT, the podcast, is brought to you by our sponsors, Longines, and we are very excited to have them back on board for 2021.
100%. We've spoken a bit about their Spirit line, so today we thought we'd mix it up and have a look at one of their more recent releases in the last few years, which I think is a certified summer hit.
Sure is. It's a platinum hit, Felix. And I think you're right. Today we're chatting about the Longines Skin Diver.
What's the deal with the Skin Diver?
I'll tell you the deal. The Longines Heritage Skin Diver has been around for a little while now, and it's a really beautiful timepiece with distinctive looks. This is actually a reissue of sorts from the original Longines Vintage Nautilus Skin Diver. The modern version, though, well, the bezel has a matte finishing to it. It's actually PVD-coated steel, reminiscent of the original plastic ones used on those 1950s models. It's also got slightly sort of off-white, creamy markers, and the dial, wowee, is black and full of texture, so much so you can feel like you can touch it. But complementing this, a gorgeous font has been used, and sort of long, thin minute markers both kind of lean into that vintagey style of the loom. The text on the dial has been kept to a minimum, letting those sort of various colours and textures speak for themselves.
Absolutely, Andy. It's a beautiful looking modern retro dive watch. And with those longer lugs, it leans into that, overall vintage aesthetic. How do I get one, Andy?
Do you want to know the price first?
Yeah, I do. Tell me.
Alrighty, so the price is 3,925 Australian dollars, and it's available at longines.com with free shipping and 24-month warranty.
Now tempt me with the finer details.
Tempt I shall. 42mm stainless steel case with an automatic movement, the Longines L888 caliber. That's 64 hours of power reserve for you. Now, it's waterproof to 300 meters with a nifty diving bezel that's got little notches for extra grip.
Love some extra grip. Who is the Longines Heritage Skin Diver for?
Yeah, maybe you're a vintage Longines fan but can't locate one of the few 1950s models, or perhaps you enjoy the vintage aesthetic and the combination of reliable modern build quality. Either way, it's robust and attractive. It can be dressed up, down, even sideways, depending on the strap you choose. And maybe you're into like a larger dive watch, or maybe you're an actual skin diver.
Yeah, I think that really covers all the bases.
Bingo. So head to longines.com to discover the collection today and buy it online. We'll link it up, and we'll be posting hands-on pictures to our Instagram.
And again, don't forget the free shipping and 24-month warranty when you buy from Longines online.
Now let's get back to the show.
So, Andy, I think I'll kick off. I want to put you in the hot seat, first of all, to use a dated Eddie Maguire reference. Who is Andy Green?
Who is Andy Green? Well, I love cats. I love eating plants. I love drinking a lot of coffee. And I love dive watches. As a lot of people know, watches for me aren't full-time, but they're certainly a pretty significant portion of my time. And I do a lot of things in the space, sometimes with Felix, sometimes without.
That hurts my feelings, that you would do something without me. But
Secret projects.
You're cutting me out? Is it OTV2? So, all right. So I've got a few questions for you. I think I want to start with, what was the first watch you ever had the hots for, so to speak?
The first watch that I can remember, it's a funny one, but it's an Omega Flightmaster. It was the first watch I ever posted to Instagram as like a watch. I didn't know, and I was just like, this is a cool watch.
Hang on. So were you already interested in watches then? Or was it an Omega Flightmaster?
Sort of. Well, I've been interested in watches since I was probably like 16, but it was the first sort of watch that I was like, oh, wow, that's really hot. What is this? Maybe I should go down to a boutique and try and find one.
Lol. Wasn't going to happen
Yeah.
even then. Well, so how did you get like? I mean, was that what got you interested in watches? How did the sort of the passion evolve from seeing a flight master to hosting your own watch podcast?
Yeah, it's interesting. So that's the question everyone asks you when they find out you're into watches,
Hmm.
and I'm going to ask you as well. But for me, I liked the idea of a nice watch and using a nice watch to sort of mark a milestone or as sort of a reward. And that sort of, I started working at like 14 years old, and I've always had a good work ethic. And so for me, a watch was sort of a marker of, maybe I made some money or had some pocket money, but it was also something that I could kind of see where it went versus, buying clothes or something that, I didn't have in 6 months' time. So I actually
Mm.
remember my first ever tax return. I was like delighted that I got a tax return when I was 16. It was this whole new thing for me.
Was it also
I
your
was doing a bit.
last ever tax return?
Yeah, it was actually my first and my last at 16. So I peaked then. But I went out and bought a fashion watch, and I spent like $600 as a
Nice,
16-year-old. So it's a
nice.
pretty big flex back in the day, and I wore that watch for like 2 years, 3 years before I finally worked out what I was doing.
What can I ask what it was?
It was just like a really simple Hugo Boss dress watch from, I
Ooh.
think, like David Jones.
This would have been in the pre-Daniel Wellington era too.
It was, yeah,
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 okay.
yeah, just.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool.
But I thought it was cool.
Yeah. So that's your first watch, but I think
hmm
we all know that doesn't count as your first nice watch. What was your first like proper sort of a bit more grown up nice watch?
So they continued. I mean, my first, what I would call my nice watch, and what a lot of people would define as nice. So I'll give you the answers for both. But the
Mm-hmm.
first sort of nice watch was a Zetum, which was a independent brand. I don't know if they're still around. They might be. I did a lot of reading on, funnily enough, Worn and Wound.
Nice.
They did a hands-on review. I kind of realized I wanted something that was had an automatic movement, that was well made, that had some waterproofness, that was sort of a bit of a different design. And so it was a Zetum, I think it's Stenson was the model.
Yeah, yeah. No lugs. So like look basically a cylinder, yeah?
No lugs, just a
Yeah.
cylinder. Yeah, going back to that Flightmaster sort of look of just circular. And so I got that when I was like 21, about $1,000 from memory, and I wore that for a year, not even a year, for 6 months, and then I like started getting itchy. Then I moved on to another independent brand through another review on One and Round. I clearly discovered like the watch internet, and that was a March Lab. I think the model was called AM3, but it was just another cool sort of had like
Mm.
gunmetal dial. I still have it somewhere. An interesting case shape, and the feature I loved the most was a sapphire crystal case back, but had a green tint to it. So I thought I
Oh,
got to get this
nice.
watch.
Andy
Yeah, so I
Green.
bought. Yeah, really clean, really clean, really green. So I bought that on like an overseas trip from their France boutique, which was, I guess, their sort of flagship boutique. But the first like nice watch that I would sort of respectively, call nice is a Tudor Black Bay, the navy blue. So I got that the year it came out, and that was quite a hit to the wallet back in the day.
That would have
Yeah,
been 2015, I think that came out.
yeah, or 16, 14 maybe. I think the blue.
That was my first Basel. What was my first Basel I went
Yeah,
to?
I don't know. I think it was 14. Yeah, we'll work
Okay.
it out. We'll work it out. It was around then.
Yeah, right. So they're the first ones. Where's the Zetum now? Does that still exist in your world, or has it moved
They,
on?
I have them all except for the Tudor.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And what was the last nice watch you got? Most recent, I guess.
Goodness. I was going to say the Rolex Oyster Perpetual Candy Pink, but I mean, I've picked up a few since.
You've been
Both
busy.
Bamfords,
Yep.
probably the G-Shock, the Bamford G-Shock. That's a really
Oh
nice
yeah,
watch.
the Christmas present.
Christmas present, but I'd say the Candy Pink is in terms of like a
It's proper
significantly
big.
nice
Yeah.
watch.
So is that G Shock working out at the gym with you? So how's that
Yeah, I'm
going?
smashing it around. I love it.
Nice.
Such a cool watch, yeah.
And speaking of smashing things around, have you had any watch related regrets? Have you broken anything, sold anything, not bought anything?
Oh, it's the classic combination of, not buying things when they were a quarter of the price, not buying a Patek Aquanaut when they were discounted and available at the AD. Probably more regret selling watches and not fighting to like hang on to them. But it's sort of been like a bit, and mainly with the vintage stuff that I've bought over the years, sort of get something in, wear it for 6 months, sell it, buy something else, sell it, put
Yeah.
more money in. and it's sort of like an ever growing and revolving door there. But I mean, yeah, when when I started getting into watches and a Submariner was like $5,000 or $6,000, and now they're double, like you regret not buying a couple of those. But it's more about selling them, because you sell them at the time, and now you can't really afford to purchase
Get
them
it
back,
back.
or mentally it doesn't feel right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I can empathise with that. It's sort of like that feeling of, oh yeah, these aren't too hard to find. I'll sell it for this price, and if I want to get it again, I can pick it up at this price. The same
yeah,
price essentially. Fast forward, who knew?
yeah,
Uh, you
exactly.
know,
There's a
sort of.
disconnect there. It makes it hard because you remember the time that it wasn't that price.
Yeah, and I look. I think I'm sure we'll have that same conversation with the tables turned. But yeah, I don't think you can live in the past like that, Andy. You got to look to the future.
Let's keep moving forward.
Speaking of, when did your love of browsing worn and wound turn into a paying gig?
Well, you know the answer to this, but the listeners might not. So I discovered the watch internet. I kind of got immersed in that. And funnily enough, the trip that I mentioned where I picked up the March Lab, I was flying back from the UK, and I got sat next to a gentleman by the name of Andrew, who I think
What
is
are
a
the odds?
Rolex Submariner. Ended up telling me about this watch business that he was sort of starting. It was a media platform, writing reviews and bits and pieces. And I said, "Oh, look, got to be excited." I showed him the watch that I just bought, and we kind of spent the next, the second leg of the flight chatting watches and bits and pieces. And obviously, the business he was talking about was Time and Tide watches. So that sort of launched the following weeks when we returned back to Melbourne. I met you pretty early on at your time there,
Sure.
right as it launched. And I think I just kind of got so involved in the watch community and the watch space, and I just had a big interest that I just got asked to help out with events. And I think you commissioned me for an article. You're just like, "Oh, do you want to write this up?" Because growing business needed some hands.
Yeah.
So I just started plugging holes there and doing bits and pieces from social media.
Yeah, you
Paid
did do a bit of
advertising,
everything.
paid social. Wrote a couple of hundred reviews in the 4 or 5 years that I was there. A lot of events. I think
Yeah.
I appeared in a video next to you, and it just sort of escalated and escalated and escalated for me.
That was a career highlight, by the way, us talking about GMTs at Basel. That was
We'll have
great.
to link that video up. It's a banger.
Well, even more hilarious was that one of the videos was embargoed. Well, we found out
Yeah,
afterwards that it was, they'd pulled it or something, so we had to edit it out.
that's right. It was
So
like
if you,
five great GMTs
yeah,
from Basel, and then
and
we're
it
like,
turned
oh,
out
there's
to be
only
four.
four.
But that's the one that was pulled. I won't mention what it was legitimately still one of my favorite GMTs. So you've done, we talked about Time and Tide, and you did a lot there, and you sort of, jumped in the deep end, so to speak. What did you
Yeah.
learn about watches while working in the space?
Oh, it was fascinating because it timed really nicely with sort of me entering the space in a serious capacity, not long after to having access to the other side and sort of learning about watch media and learning a heap about the brands and also about retail. And I had the privilege of being sort of in a contract role and not fully embedded, and also my own person, and just learning how brands work and how sort of the information flows from a brand, to watch media, and how the finances work, and how brands, how watch media gets paid, what sort of privileges they get, the sort of access they get, and the reality of it all. And I find that really interesting even now, sort of. And as you know, and you probably sit back and do it as well, when you sort of see people, criticizing a certain, publication for this or for that, or, a YouTuber for getting a free trip to China,
Yeah.
and sort of raising this whole notion of independence and this and that. And it's really fascinating for me to kind of sit back quietly and think, well, I don't know that ever exists, because brands, one way or another, interact with people, and you get trips,
Yeah.
and you might go for a coffee, you might go for a lunch, you might get a Christmas gift, you might send a Christmas gift like we just did to
Yeah.
a lot of the brands here.
And
And
vice
I find
versa.
that really interesting, sort of having that sort of inside knowledge, and then realizing just how tightly held that is, and that just the masses don't know it, and they never would.
Well, I mean, they don't, or they just don't appreciate what that means. I think, you can objectively understand. Yeah, I 100% agree with what you're saying. But so that's sort of the business side, and, what you learn about the watch industry. What did you learn about watches in that time? Anything? Or
Oh,
is it?
heaps. Timelines, how hard it is to, make and market and, release a watch.
Yeah,
I think a lot of people think that it's because car manufacturers do it and, release a whole bunch of new models, every 2 years, that watch manufacturers move in the same way. And I think I've learned how the industry is slow moving. It's very old school, very process driven, and, it's changed a lot in the last couple of years, but it's still slow moving and has that traditional aspect to it. And it's not, you don't just release something with a week's notice, even though you can do it on the internet and a lot of
yeah,
other brands can do it. And it's very interesting.
yeah. Fascinating. Um, what's changed? So what's changed? So from 2014 to now, what has changed in terms of your job and your relationship, like professional relationship to the watch industry?
Well, obviously, I've left Time and Tide. I left it maybe 2 years ago now, and you left not long after. So separating from sort of that individual watch media platform, meaning I can write for a whole bunch of other places. You might have seen me on Bark and Jack. You might have seen me on A Collected Man or Watch Advice,
Yep.
all over the place. It means I can work directly with brands on a few projects, which is quite cool. Event hosting, public speaking, that sort of thing. In terms of like the watch world itself, obviously, I got to go to a couple of Basel Worlds, which was awesome. Travel's obviously not a thing at the moment, which is fine. But I think the community itself has grown, as has that media space. Like it's very big now. The barrier to entry is basically non-existent. If you want to become a YouTuber, you want to start a
Yeah.
podcast, you want to start your own blog. Um, but there's still the same barriers in terms of the investment of time that are just never going to go away.
Yeah.
Whatever you're doing, it's a lot of people see it and see it as an opportunity and they want to do something, which is really cool. But it's still a huge time commitment to sort of take it to that next step. And I think, we just did a rap show not long ago, and obviously have the podcast and all of these other things we talk about. And it's one thing that I'm really proud of is that we are committed to sort of taking it to the next step and really sort of investing, a lot of time and resources and even money into the stuff that we do.
It's interesting because you said the barrier to entry has never been easier, which is true.
Mm,
But I also think at the same time the bar has never been higher.
yeah,
Like in 2014, it wasn't too crowded. I mean, even if you look back a little bit further, like when guys like Hodinkee and Monochrome and A Blog to Watch were sort of starting, that was like 2008, 2010, around that sort of time.
yeah,
There was no one else really doing anything online, so they had that first position and they could do whatever they want and they set the tone. But now it's becoming increasingly professional, increasingly, you're getting, back then it was people, their side jobs became their main thing. And now it's people with, journalism degrees and, long resumes in digital media that are in this space. So it's hard. Like if you
mm,
want to be a YouTuber that likes watches to break in, it's a tough thing. And that's something that,
yeah. And a lot of well-established personalities, and I mean, the
mm,
first like watch group I think I joined on Facebook, same one as you, was like 100 members in Australia. There was a
yeah,
whole thing, and it was sort of right before Red Bar came to the country. And we've got big forums now that are like 20,000 people, but back then it was sort of it was on the cusp, and it was very much sort of a sort of a secret hobby that you might have had one or two mates that you sort of message watches to, but it wasn't this whole sort of community vibe of a lot of people and
yeah.
a lot of like consumer power there, which is
Do
really
you think? Do
interesting.
you think it's more mainstream now?
Certainly. Yeah, Instagram changed watches big time. It went from something that like your friends would look at you posting a watch and think you're a bit odd and kind of weird flexing, to now it's like all we post. Like, I'm guilty of it. You're guilty of it.
Yeah,
So that brought it more mainstream. The celebrity element really picked up. Celebrity watch spotting, that whole
yeah,
thing. I mean, the mainstream coverage that auctions have gotten, that that Hodinkee and sort of the cross syndication of content as well has been really interesting, and that's been happening
yeah.
for years and years and years now. Yeah, and I think that's tied in because watch brands moved on to the internet in the last 5 years. They
Fascinating.
have Instagram accounts, but I mean, half the time you'd be posting a photo, there wouldn't be an Instagram account for the watch brand you were talking about. It was just bizarre.
Yeah. They're pretty traditional. So I think
Yeah.
that's enough of the business. What do
Hmm.
you love about watches? Just in general, broad topic.
Well, I love. I mean, for me, I love wearing a watch because it's sort of. I feel like it completes an outfit, and I can be wearing gym gear or whatever, and have a nice watch on and feel good in a sense, but I really just like looking down and sort of it's like tokenistic, but it's I like seeing like the hard work and the efforts in something and using them to sort of mark milestones or mark or set them as goals for me. But really, what I like about watches isn't the watches themselves. Like it gives you something to talk about. It gives us a show to talk about.
Yeah.
Gives us a reason to talk to all of these guests, and it's a big reason of why I wanted to start this podcast was because we were having all these great conversations, and often it started with a look at someone's wrist and saying, "Oh, that's a nice watch," and finding out that they like watches, and you talk about the watch for 2 minutes, and then you have a really good conversation for an hour about something else.
Mm.
And this just kept happening to me. I thought, wouldn't it be great to find a format to capture that in, which is why one half
Sure.
of the podcast wanted to do it.
So that's what so what you like about watches isn't watches. It's the stuff around watches. It's the milestones that remind you of something you've done, and it's the people. Yeah, I get it. I want to nail it down a little bit further. What do you like in a watch? Like black dials, bezels.
Yeah, okay.
Precious
Guilty of a dive watch. It's changing. I'm guilty of loving a dive watch, but I think I have enough dive watches. I like good quality. I like feeling it. Like, what should I say? I like the feel of quality on my wrist. I don't want to feel cheap or.
Don't we all?
No, you're paying a lot of money for something. You want it to feel like it's worth a lot of money.
Okay.
But now it's sort of shifting. It's sort of shifting towards more personality. Hence the pink dial. Hence a look more closely at precious metals and gems and that sort of thing.
Yeah, you've been pretty.
It's personality driven now. I want unique looks. Yeah, just let the personality out.
Yeah, you've been like, as far as I've known you, you've had and I don't mean this in a sort of a negative way at all, but you've had a pretty safe collection.
Yeah.
Like it's been a lot of Rolex, it's been Tudor, there's been, sort of quality, like benchmark pieces in there.
Yeah.
And now you're sort of, you are. And is it because you've covered those bases, you feel you can maybe start to explore some different sides of your horological personality?
I think so. And I think you kind of, as you get more and more exposed to it, you get a little bit bored of seeing the same things over and over again, just naturally. Sure. I mean, the regular person on the street is never going to see the watches that we see every day. And even the people that are hardcore in the community, there are people that have never seen a Nautilus. There are people that have never seen a Gemset Daytona. And it's sort of, it's psychologically quite weird to, be holding your mate's rainbow day date one day and then kind of think about, your next watch, and it puts you in this headspace of wanting just something different. And it's weirdly normal for us to be looking at crazy watches. And so what that means to me is, well, I want something different. I want something that speaks to me more.
Sure. On the other side of the coin, what irritates you or pisses you off about watches? Either the hobby or the space or design or brands, and take from it what you will.
What pisses me off about watches? Well, it's one of those hyper niche interests, and you do get quite a bit of negativity that I don't like. Even down to the design of it. Started with the design of watches, and then publications, and whatever else. I've never been pissed off by a watch design, and I find it weird that people do get angry at design itself. Obviously, someone designs a watch, they like the design, their boss likes it, board of directors says, yeah, okay, let's make, thousands of these and sell them and see how it goes.
Yeah.
And I think for me, part of, working going back to what we talked about before, part of working and doing reviews and sort of working with brands was you had to review watches, and you might not want to buy it. You have to separate yourself and your personal taste to an extent and just sort of appreciate that this is a design that someone made and sort of talk about that. And I think the Tim Mossel episode really kind of covered off on that approach nicely. I agree with that. What else? Waitlists are a little bit of a pain, but that's just the reality of it all.
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's more people that want to watch than they have watches, so how else are you going to deal with it?
Blame the internet for that.
Speaking of waitlists, how do you like that segue, by the way? That was a perfect segue. Do you believe in grails?
Yes, I do. I think that idea works for me. And you've put plural on there, which is good. I think I would rather have, one or two or three watches that I really, really wanted, and I wanted to go out and find or work towards and save up enough money, or wait a long time to get allocated one, than just sort of taking whatever pass comes my way over the years. It seems like it's a much cleaner approach to the hobby for me anyway. Like I can't take every watch I get offered, retail or otherwise or vintage. So for me, having like a really clear focus on,
Yeah,
you know, I want this, this, and this,
yeah.
and I'll save up, and when they come, is much more relaxing for me.
Can you share what any of those potential grails are?
Well, yes. I want a Daytona, black Daytona, to all the authorized dealers listening. So I'm working
New
on
one,
the
so
black
new
Daytona.
current
Yeah, of
production.
course. I can't
Yep,
afford a black Daytona at resale.
yep.
And the one after that, I think, is going to be a day date of some sorts. I'm still working out whether I go sort of neo vintage or just new.
Okay.
Um, yeah, so they're the sort of the two that I'm working towards.
Hang on, hang on,
Obviously,
hang on. Before we go to the last one, I've got a challenge for you.
what's that?
Can't be Rolex, or
For
maybe you can
yeah,
be.
okay.
Okay, no. Like it's your list. You can do whatever you want. Sorry.
I mean, it's my list. I mean, and I have like a secondary list,
Oh,
like of watches that aren't,
Rolex.
yeah, that are Rolex. So, I mean, I really want a Sapaneva. That's one I really want.
Oh,
I want to add in.
interesting.
Yeah, it's just a different choice.
Yeah,
I toy with the idea of a harboring as well, or harboring too, I guess.
sure. The Felix.
The Felix Chrono. Yeah, I really like that watch. So there's stuff like that that plays around on the peripheries that I'm kind of, I think about. But in terms of grail and like, blinders,
Yeah,
no blinkers on, just looking straight at it.
yeah.
Those are the two that I kind of really have to work
That's
hard
pretty
for.
solid.
And yeah.
Would you pay premium?
Oh, I often think about it. Not now, but if when the Daytona first came out with the ceramic bezel and they were sort of like 2 or 3K over, I probably should have. That's a watch regret right there, because I just thought, oh no, you're gonna lose money. This is never gonna keep going up. Of course,
Yeah,
they
yeah.
tremendously have.
And what if
No.
money wasn't as much of a concern? Like, say you could easily afford the whatever a Nautilus is selling for these
Yeah,
days.
totally. Because I'm really impatient. Yep, I would. I would. I wouldn't care. If it was in the window and that was the price on it, I probably would. I don't.
And
Yeah.
what does your collection, if you want to share some of it, what does it look like at the moment? Just a quick
We
run
talk
through.
about it a bit. There's some vintage pieces in there. There's some modern Rolex. People will see on my Instagram. There's pieces from Independence still. I've got a couple of Halios. Quite a few Bamford pieces now from his various collaborations.
Bremont. I've got the Bremont.
Yeah, I got the Bremont MB2. I lose track of the others. The problem is you start collecting watches and you then have to store them off site, and you don't see a lot of them. And during lockdown, I haven't seen a lot of my watches. So
Almost,
it'll be a bit
we're
of a shift this year.
almost at the end of it.
Yeah.
How would you put a cap on the number of watches you'd own?
Yeah, I get unsettled when I have too many watches. I don't like it because I'm very practical and I don't want to have a lot of watches. And at the same time, don't want to have watches that are too valuable that I won't wear.
Sure.
Or too delicate that I won't wear them.
Yeah.
So for me, it's a really sweet spot. And I think about it a lot of like, how much money do I want in this hobby?
Yeah. Okay.
How many watches do I want that spread over? I
Such
don't want
an
to keep
accountant.
piling. Yeah, I just don't want to keep piling money in, and I also don't want to have thousands or tens of thousands of dollars sitting somewhere just not being utilized. So for me, and I get nothing out of having 10 watches in the safe. Like, that doesn't really give me anything. I'd much rather wear and enjoy a handful of pieces. So
Yeah.
there are pieces, and it gets hard when you get kind of have sentimental pieces that maybe was a Christmas gift, or was one that you like a Halios that you waited for, and it's not worth lots and lots of money.
It's
But
not
it's
worth flipping
still-
it or whatever. Or
and it's not worth flipping it, but it's still there as an object, and it kind of it's sort of ever changing dynamic. But I still have limits. Like I have limits on what I would spend on a watch and how much I would kind of have tied up, for sure.
I think I know what you're saying about those ones that you don't want to get rid of, but you also don't wear anymore. My solution to that is the old permanent loan.
Well, I'm actually loaning a watch, so I'm sending off a watch. It'll be this week to a mate of mine, one of my Halioses, the Seaforth, to a mate. And he's sort of he's in the UK in lockdown, and I thought, well, I'll just like UPS, send it over, 150
Yeah,
bucks.
you're not wearing it too much.
Bronze, it'll patina nicely. Add some dings. Like, I'd rather see you have something new to wear and enjoy. than have it sort of have one of my watches sitting around, and mixes things up as well. And I don't know, he might send me one later to play with. So
Yeah,
yeah.
sure. Yeah. I'm a big fan of that for people and trust and all that sort of stuff. All right. Wrapping it up. We've gone long. You
Yeah.
have to submit a watch matchmaking brief right now to
Okay.
us, to OT the podcast. What is it? You got to do it in the
Okay.
voice, like read out the email voice. Hi guys.
Okay. So is it for myself?
Yeah, for you.
Okay. Hi guys, my name's Andy. I've got $15,000 to spend on a watch. No, I've got so it'd be 15K. Wear it. I want to be able to wear it every day. I'm not saying I'm going to wear it every day, but I want it to go with everything because I'm a simple guy. I want it to waterproofness doesn't really matter that much because I don't get near water, but enough to like wash my hands in the sink.
Sure.
No black dials. And can't be a mainstream brand. Got to be independent.
Up until then,
And
I was going and
sub
what? Sorry?
40 or 40 sub 41 millimeters too.
Okay. Up until that point, I was just going. It's got to be a white dial Daytona, but no mainstream brands killed it.
No mainstream brands.
Okay. Last question. Top 3 dream podcast guests. Go.
Okay, Dwayne the Rock Johnson.
Nice.
1. Ed Sheeran.
Solid.
I want Ed Sheeran.
You are dreaming big.
Third. I dream big. Who's the third, Felix? Who's the third?
I don't know.
It's amazing.
Your interview, mate.
Jonah Hill.
Ooh, yeah. You've talked about Jonah a few times. That's solid. Well, Andy, thanks for coming on OT the podcast. Now you need to interview me.
Yeah, I'm lucky that we put me first so that people continue listening through. We'll get that sort of listen rate up.
Or they just skip
Felix.
now. We'll see a completion rate just end.
Time code, yeah. It just drops off. 30 minutes and they've dropped off.
Andy, could we just take a break? I need a refill.
What are you drinking, Felix?
It's your classic filter roast from our new coffee sponsor, Inglewood Coffee Roasters.
Beverage sponsor, Felix, we have made it.
I've got a cheeky Yirgacheffe filter on the go at the moment. Ethiopian bean with some light floral notes. It's my daily, and I can't get enough.
Well, Felix, I'm actually punching out another double espresso using their Colombian Spirit of Peace espresso roast blend. It's sweet and biscuity.
So here's the deal. Use OT30, that's OT30, for 30% off your order at checkout. On top of that, Inglewood Coffee Roasters offer free shipping on all Victorian orders and Australia-wide when you spend more than $50.
Head to inglewoodcoffeeroasters.com.au to place an order today. We'll link that up. OT the podcast, fueled by Inglewood Coffee Roasters. Alrighty, Felix. So I want you to tell us who you are, tell us about your work that you do, and how you got into watches quickly.
My name's Felix. I'm a full-time watch writer for a variety of publications. Revolution Australia is probably the main one. I've written a lot for GQ. Who else do I write for? Executive Style, Collected Man, Executive Traveller, not Executive Style. Gosh, wish I wrote for Executive Style. Bit of a few other places around the world. Freelance life is always varied. What else do I do aside from watches? Was that your question, Andy? I don't know. I've got a cat. I live at home. I listen to podcasts. I don't drive. It's my secret shame. I watch too much Netflix. I'm into... I used to work in video shops, and I've got still a long and passionate love of obscure videos and movies.
Very big into watching shows with RuPaul's Drag Race?
Oh, mate, drag queens. That's mine.
You are big into the drag queens. All right.
I'm trying to integrate. I'm trying to integrate drag queens into OT the podcast.
I reckon it's every second episode at this point. All right. So you mentioned Revolution Australia. What is the most stressful thing about writing print?
There's a few things that stress me out. Typos are always stressful because they always happen, no matter how many people look over it. Like, so when you put something in for print, you check it. Sub-editor checks it, editor checks it, someone else will probably check it. So depending on the process, like there's, many eyes that are looking at your writing, typos still get through. That'll always stress you out. I don't sweat that so much. The things that I find more stressful day to day are like getting the right images and like timelines. Like, cause I'm used to digital where I can like go, I need to do that. I'll do it 5 minutes before and it's all good. Whereas for print, you've got, bigger lead times and that leads to more organisation. There you go.
Interesting. So Revolution, obviously, one of our alum guests,
Mhm.
Waco. What's it like working for Mr. Co?
Pretty good. I don't have too much to do with Mr. Co on a daily basis. I haven't seen him since I've been his employee. Actually, I would have, probably caught up at a few trips if it was a normal, travel arrangement. But I've chatted on Instagram a bit, and otherwise, it's a big team over there, and there's managing directors and editors in chief and
Mm.
all these other sort of people around. So I get given jobs, I make suggestions, and yeah, it's pretty chill.
Yeah, interesting. So you talk about getting given jobs, but you actually gave me my first watch review. Do you remember
Mhm.
what it was and what your first thoughts on the first review I ever wrote was?
Was it a review or was it the first piece of writing I got you to
Probably
do?
both.
The
Don't
first piece
remember.
of writing was a write up on Hublot releasing some watches with Bar Raffaelli, I think, that had
Uh-huh.
embroidery dials.
The
Your
broderie, I think.
well, I think that's Swiss French for embroidery.
Hmm.
But I can't remember what the first review was. What was it?
This guy's got talent. Yeah, this is one to watch.
Uh,
Cool. Hey,
what was the feedback? What did I tell you about
I think you just like published it straight away. No issues, nothing. Gold
it? No
star.
feedback. Classic. Just like,
No
thanks,
feedback.
mate.
Just that's how good it was. No feedback.
Yeah.
Alrighty. So you've been riding around the watch space for a long time, but what was your first nice watch?
Archimede. That'll be the one. Uh, Archimede Pilot's Watch 42mm that I bought in 2009, I think.
Do you still have it?
Yes, as we were talking about earlier, it is currently on permanent loan with my brother.
Okay.
So
Okay. You gonna
I
get it
still
back
like it.
or?
And that's one of those things like sometimes you can look at those first watches you bought and you go, oh, I can't believe I bought that. That's terrible. I would still happily wear that watch. If it was the only watch I had, I'd be quite happy. So, I
You
think that's a
reviewed that
win.
watch, right? There's a review of that somewhere.
Maybe for Hodinkee. I reviewed a few Archimedes for Hodinkee. I don't know if... I don't think I've spoken about that particular watch a few times, but I think it was a pretty known quantity by the time I bought it, so there was no real
Yeah.
newsworthiness
Okay.
to it.
Well, you've bought a few watches over the last, 10 years or so. Definitely last year, you bought yourself a few. But has there been one that got away over the time you've been in the space?
I mean, over the time that, I'll often say this to you, I can't get over the thinking that a Rolex Submariner is a $5,000 watch.
Yeah.
Do you know what I
Stuck
mean?
in that point.
Like for me, that is what it was. That's my sort of set value for that watch, and I probably should have bought one at those points, but I didn't have the cash. There's one that I do sort of think about a few times. One of my mates was selling a nice Polar Explorer 2, and I could have got it for mates' rates, but it still would have been a bit of work for me to put together. I think you want to have $3,500.
Damn.
And I'm like, oh, it's a lot of money for Felix right now. Nah, I'll just get one later. And what are they now? Like 13K? 10, 13?
Yeah, they're up there. They're low teens. Yeah,
So, I probably should
it's
have,
got away.
but I don't think he can, that's not a way to live. I've been doing it
No,
long
it's not.
enough. So I've seen things that were cool become uncool. And I'm assuming that, things will settle down at some point.
Is that still on your list, the Polar Explorer?
Yeah, somewhere on there. Like, I think if I was to buy a Rolex, it would be that still.
Hmm.
Oh, maybe an OP or Explorer 2. The old one, not
Interesting.
the new one.
How has what you liked in change? How has what you like in watches changed over the years?
It's become, in some ways, it sort of hasn't changed too much. I'm still drawn to simpler watches. Like, I'm not a very big fan of, complications. I don't particularly love chronographs.
Mm-hmm.
But it's sort of evolved and streamlined in some ways. So, like, whereas 5 years ago, I would have been pretty into all the specs and the bezel and like really focused on that. Now I realize I don't need that or I don't want that. I just want a watch that will do the job that I want it, which is, to be worn daily, to be look nice, to please me, and to tell the time. I think I've worked out that some stuff that maybe I would have stressed about back in the day doesn't matter.
Mhm.
Like, I don't care about movements,
Yeah.
really. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's something that sort of young players to the game are like, oh, is it a Solita or is it an ETA or is it a, something else or a sop rod? And I'm like, I don't really care. It does the same thing. The servicing price is going to be the same.
Yeah.
It's a modern mechanical automatic movement. They're all pretty good. I don't,
Interesting.
yeah, and I don't get stressed about dates or all that sort of nitpicky stuff, really.
So what surprises you with watches these days then?
We've watched design or like
Yeah, in the watch
product
industry. What
releases.
surprised you? OG Hodinky days, seeing where they've come today. You were one of the first sort of contributors, but what surprises you? What email hits your inbox that makes you go, wow?
Not a lot. Like honestly, not a whole lot surprises me. I think because it's gone from sort of a passion and a hobby into my job. I'm pretty aware of a lot of things that happen. Every so often, a brand will come out with a release that I'll find surprising or a little left of center. But even so, by this point, I'm like, I know what a brand is going to like do, broadly speaking. Like, Bremont's going to make overtooled pilot's watches. Omega's going to release, 20 variants of a classic design, and Rolex is going to make the same watch slightly different. Actually, Rolex might have been. They surprised me like that. Them releasing so many watches in 2020 was probably
Yeah.
a decent surprise. And other stuff, like I really appreciate when someone does a good, and this is super fucking industry nerdy. I love it when someone does a good ad campaign or they do like an interesting ambassador tie-in or something like that. I find that stuff interesting and
Yeah,
surprising
fascinating. What
occasionally.
what about like pleasant surprise with pricing? Because often, you'd send so many watches throughout the day. Do you find that you kind of, oh, that's good value. That's cheaper than I thought. That's a nice surprise.
Um, Sometimes. I think that's, yeah, I mean, the value's still there. Like I can see something, I can go, oh, that is really good for the price. Like, but again, my sort of understanding, like day-to-day understanding of price caps out at about 20K.
Mm.
Like under 20K, I've got a pretty solid handle on what you can get. And I think that sort of speaks to me and what I could ever feasibly, afford to buy a watch for. I'm not going to look at, gyro tourbillons. So I don't care if it's 200,000 or 700,000. Like it's all pretty abstract.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? Especially brands like Richard Mille.
Yeah.
We don't
Why
we
bother?
don't get sent press watches. We never see them. Like I don't think I've seen about 5 in my life in person.
Yeah.
It's just not a watch that you ever need to really invest time in learning about personally. So
Well, yeah, not from like it's from a client or as a a passion. Like it's so, unless they're doing something amazing with materials or technology that I'm interested in or writing up for work, it's not something that crosses my internet browsing history too much.
yeah, love that. How do you stay interested in watches? Don't hit watch fatigue. How do you make sure that doesn't happen?
It definitely comes in waves. Like there are times when you just feel burnt out. Like and that's something
You
that
hit a wall.
oh mate, so many walls. I'm like bloody Roadrunner. Does Roadrunner hit walls?
You just
Wile E.
blows them.
Coyote. Wile E. Coyote hits
Yeah.
walls. How do I deal with that? I think it's keeping sane. Like you can't. I've had to change how I engage with watches and like the watch community. Like I don't typically like early on. I'll like catch up with people. I'll be like, oh, I love this. I love seeing this. Oh, show me that. Show me that. And now I'll do that. I still do that. Like I've got lots of watch mates, but they're just my friends that happen to like watches rather than my new watch friends.
Yeah, fair.
And I guess that's like filtering your life. Like it's my job and I don't always want to be working. So I've got to protect other things in my life to keep that interest in something that, pays my bills, but I also find immensely personally gratifying, sustainable, I suppose.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah.
Fair.
But also, I think the other thing about that is you've just got to, you can't do it all at once and you've got to sort of find what you like. Like, we were saying before, I know what I like in a watch, and I can appreciate all sorts of other stuff, but it's not, I'm not going out lusting after a Blancpain G Evo from 2010. Like, that's, I can appreciate it, but it's not something I'm going to stress about in my own time.
100%. I
Hmm.
agree. I
I guess.
agree. Why is it that you famously hate Rolex?
Tell me where this comes from, Andy Green. Why do I hate Rolex? Where is this question coming from? And why is it
Whenever I get
famous?
a Rolex, you always another Rolex. There's
Oh,
undertones.
no, it's not Rolex. It's you.
Ah, okay. All right. Fair enough. What I want to know next is, do you have a grail and
No,
are
no,
you
no, no, hang
motivated
on, hang on,
by
hang on, hang
watches?
on. No, I can answer that question why I hate Rolex.
Okay, it's confirming it.
I'm rejecting the premise of the question. But I can see what you're saying. I am frustrated by Rolex a lot of the time.
Hmm.
I think it's fair to say I sort of have a personal love-hate relationship with them.
Yeah, same.
Um, they're just so good at what they do.
Yep.
But sometimes I
Yep.
wish they do something a little bit different, but then I don't.
Yeah, exactly.
And
It's just
also, I
it's more
think,
conflict, isn't it? Conflict.
yeah, like, I mean, uh, it's not hating Rolex, it's hating what people make Rolex into being and invest in the brand. Like, I
Mm.
don't, to Rolex's credit, I don't think they've ever wanted to do anything beyond make a good, reliable watch that will last someone for a long time to the best of their ability at a certain price
Yeah.
point.
Yeah, 100%.
And for me, like, the Rolex Submariner was originally intended to be a watch that could be worn by divers, by fishermen, by rich guys who wanted a nice watch, and everyone could achievably do that. Like, with a bit of saving and, you know,
Hard work.
hard
Yep.
work and all that sort of stuff. It's like the American dream. Anyone could have a Rolex Sub. These days, it's become conflated with so much, as for good and ill. It's either the greatest watch ever made, or it's worth so much over retail. It's just, I get a bit tired of that.
Hmm.
But the Rolex Sub, by and large, great watch. It's all the
Yeah,
stuff around Rolex that I hate, I suppose.
that's fair. That's a good answer.
Thank
I'm
you.
glad I got that out of you. So, do you have a grail and are you motivated by watches?
What do you mean? Am I motivated by watches?
Do you see them as something as, I've kind of said that for me, it's something that like drives me to, work late and sort of, open up other businesses and really kind of work towards as a sort of target to get towards.
Are you
Do
trying to
you,
incentivize me with the OT Podcast 2021 bonus structure?
I'm just seeing if I dangle an Explorer 2 in front of you, whether or not you'll work a bit harder.
Probably not. No, I don't have a grail. I don't really believe in grails. I think I've said that once or twice. Uh, no, they're just watches. And I think that the term, it's just become so arbitrary. It's like when you see someone on an internet forum going, guys, finally got my grail, the Tag Heuer Aqua Racer. Not to
Great watch.
not to
Great
not to
watch.
criticize Tag Heuer, or the Aqua Racer, or the guy who really, really loves it. But for me, a grail has to be unobtainable. And it has to
Yeah,
be something you have to really sort of, like a Knight of Camelot, go on a quest to get. So I
I
don't,
like it.
I'm not into grails as a concept. Am I motivated by watches? No, because I think if I was, it'd just be too hard. Like, I have to find motivation in other things, because if I was like, oh, I'm going to, do this, I'm going to do that would just be madness. I'd have too many watches and it wouldn't be, again, sustainable for me. I like
Fair,
watches,
fair,
and
fair.
I've really had to clamp down on that desire to constantly buy them, or to scratch some sort of need with new watches, because it'd just be too much.
What do you like about watches?
A lot of things, really. Um, in what sense? In any particular?
Well, you work in them full time. You work for multiple publications in a full time capacity. You must
Okay,
like them. What is it?
so as an object, I like the fact that they are fairly intensely engineered objects that have a really, really long and rich tradition and a history about them. Like, I mean, you can say the same for other things. You can say the same for cars. You can say the same
Yeah.
for, I don't know, pens or knives or hats. But for me, it's just watches. So that's a bit arbitrary, but that's what I appreciate about them is the combination of sort of artistic skill and design expression as well as technical achievement. I find that fascinating.
Sure.
And I think that feeds into the bigger thing that I like about watches that I've evolved, my interest has evolved in that I like the people around watches. I like the community or the brands or, the designers or all that whole ecosystem that surrounds these objects is something that I've come to understand and appreciate over the years. And for me, they're sort of almost more important than the watches themselves. Like Helios is a good example. Like, I really like chasing it, at Helios, and he's a lovely guy, and I've sort of, emailed him on and off over the years, and he's, I've got a good relationship with him, and the fact that he happens to make nice watches is almost beside the point now. Like, I support him, and his watches are great, so Helios is great.
Excellent.
Sure.
Excellent answer. What are your top 3 dream guests?
For OT the podcast?
Yeah.
Well, you went pretty hard on your guests.
I dream big.
Yeah, you dream big.
Felix.
I'm gonna dream big, but maybe a little bit more accessible.
Don't crush my dreams.
No, I'm not going to crush your dreams. I reckon Ilaria Urbanati. She's someone on my sort of long list of people that I think would have some great watch stories. So she used to be a stylist.
Yeah.
For like, she might still be a stylist for sort of red carpet.
Big names.
Mostly guys. Like, unlike a lot of stylists, she sort of specialised in male clients. Rami Malek and Armie Hammer and some other dudes. The Rock, actually.
Ryan Reynolds, The Rock.
Yeah. So she'd be great. I reckon she'd have a really interesting perspective on that sort of Hollywood red carpet side of things. Who else would be really great? God, I should have been more prepared for this question. I'd like to speak to, I reckon Tom Hanks would be great.
Yeah.
Just in general. I mean, if we're going with a great guest, Tom Hanks, he's done some interesting stuff with watches in it. And I reckon an astronaut. I don't care.
Yeah, okay.
Just any sort of someone that's
yeah.
been in space a lot and,
Spaceman.
Oh, actually, no. Oh, bloody, what's his name? He was at an Amiga event I was at a few years ago now. God.
Buzz.
I forget his name. No, not Buzz.
George.
No, he was one of the NASA astronauts, Apollo 17, I think. God, I can't remember his name. Anyway, one of those original astronaut guys would be amazing because that's it's the sort of thing like once you landed on the moon and did that whole like golden era of NASA space exploration, that is your life. You cannot escape that. Like this guy's still talking about it and he's, 77. It's like being a president. It's the last job he'll ever have sort of thing. So I reckon that'd be great. Anyway,
Amazing.
That's a bit of a messy list of dream guests. Not as good as yours.
No, I clearly dream about it much more than you do. If you could create a limited edition watch with a reality TV show, who and what would it be?
What brand can I work with and what sort of budget?
Whatever you want it to be.
It's all open?
Yeah, it's open.
I feel like you
Dream
want me to
big.
say RuPaul's Drag Race here.
Shocked.
And I'm not going to disappoint you.
Yeah. What's the watch?
What is the watch? Actually, I don't know. I reckon it'd be a limited series and he would do one watch for each of the contestants in a series of RuPaul's Drag Race. Like, so the season.
Okay.
So you do it's a run of 13. So I don't know if they've got like 13 contestants. You do one watch for each contestant. Maybe you get a bit of their design input. They'll be terrible at that. But yeah, that's what I do. That's the top line concept.
Okay. I'm sure there's some of the bigger groups out there that can handle that volume of limited editions.
Well, I mean, look, maybe it's like, who knows how it is. Maybe there's a one of one in like gold that goes to, it's auction for charity, and then there's a run of 50 or something in steel with a less fancy dial that's commercially available. We can work out the details later, Andy. I'll just
The
get on that.
CSR news coming out right now. I love it. All right, my last question for Felix. What is the best thing about having a podcast with Andy Green?
I just don't know how to answer that question.
Fuck. Savage.
No, obviously it's talking to you at odd times of the day. And waking me up for 6 o'clock interviews that I might not be fully conscious for.
Well, someone's got it because your alarm sure won't.
Mate, my alarm.
I love that.
Snooze-a-rama. No, I mean, it's been a really, I think, to take that question seriously, obviously it's great continuing to have a working relationship with you. But I think I'm really enjoying building something that you and I collectively own rather than working for other people. Like, a lot of my life is, doing stuff for others, and it's nice to do something for myself.
Working for the man, being the man.
Ending on a selfish note.
Very good, very good. Well, I think that's going to cover off the interviews that we've talked about. Maybe a last question for both of us to answer. What's on our list for 2021? What do we want? Is there a watch we want? Is there something we want for the show? You got anything, Felix?
Oh, you want, for a watch, I reckon I've been going on about getting a Grand Seiko for years. I should probably
Just
get one.
do it, man. Just do it.
Okay. And for the podcast, what do I want to do for the podcast? I just think we've had such a strong start. I just want to continue that. Like, I don't want to, sort of set unrealistic expectations, but I just want to keep up the momentum and, continue the effort and all that sort of jazz. What about you?
Yeah, same answer for the podcast. I want to double it. I want to double the year we've just had, and I think we can.
Okay,
So
all right, putting
pressure's
expectations
on,
on
big
it.
boy.
Jesus.
Watch-wise...
Andy, motivated by watches green. If we double it, we can each get a Daytona.
Yeah, well, let's double it. So then the second part is get that Daytona. It's my 30th birthday this year. Daytona's coming. It's going to happen. We're going to do it. I'm just going to harass people until I do.
What are they worth aftermarket?
Too much, mate. Too much.
Is this why we've got to make the podcast so much bigger?
Yeah, we're going to double it. We're going to double that revenue.
We've got a quadrillion it.
Well, that was fun. We did say at the start, short or long. Obviously, we went long. We've just got too much to waffle on about. But as always, thank you to this week's sponsor, Longines. We will link everything up for them. Yep. Thank you, Major Tom Media, for putting the show together. Sorry that you have to listen to all of this again.
Sure.
Felix, how can people email us their feedback and 5-star reviews?
And just, I think this, more than any other episode, is the one to give us some feedback and some, criticism, if you will. otthepodcast@gmail.com is a way to do that. Through the gram of Insta, it can be ot.podcast. And as always, as you said, 5-star reviews, sharing is really great
Help
on
us
any
get those
platform.
Daytonas.
Yeah. I don't really want a Daytona.
You're going to get one. Matching.
Oh, God.
Engrave the case backs. Felix and Andy. Be like Bill and Ted.
Nice callback. On that note, I think we should go, Andy.
Alrighty. Peace.